So it's my huge pleasure to have Kerri Babbington here with us today. And Kerri works with a highly vulnerable group of our population, women who are the subject of domestic abuse or domestic violence, really. And she's just back from a trip to see her family back in New Zealand. She's lives here in Perth, Australia. So not so far from where I live, but given the lockdown and the fact that Kerri's actually now in quarantine, there's no opportunity for anybody to really catch up with her and so on. But, Kerri, I just really welcome you here into this conversation and the wonderful interviews that have been coming together for this Congress. And I'd like you to introduce yourself and just talk about your journey that led you up to your current employment, and also the spiritual journey, and also the journey within yourself in terms of your own personal development and those things. So feel free to sort of join all those bits together and be comfortable to join everything together.
Thank you. I'll try to do that. So yes, I was born in New Zealand and I was actually raised within a cult environment, so a very heavily restricted, religious, disciplinarian, authoritarian environment. So actually, as I grew up, I became aware that freedom was not given to all people and that all people were not equal. And I realized that as I got older and I grew, I realized that for many groups, in particular women and children, and all over the world, different marginalised groups did not have the same access to resources or to freedom. So this has always been a fundamental driver for me, that all groups are given access to all things, and that freedom is the number one right as humans in this world and on this planet, and that everybody should have freedom. It's something that I take very, very seriously when some person or a group of people have power over another and have the right to tell somebody else what is happening spiritually, emotionally, socially. So whatever I've done in my life has been around working within that dynamic to support people to become free. So currently that's led me through a whole lot of work and excuse me, in the community in terms of social work in New Zealand, working with youth, working with women, working with rural women, working with men who are unemployed, working with different groups who are somehow marginalised and not able to have the same experiences, and then coming to Perth, Australia, and working in the domestic violence for the last 7.5 years, based in a women's refuge in the southeast metro of Perth, which actually has the highest domestic violence rate in Australia, I believe. So that is what I have done so far, and as well as that, sort of developed a whole lot of things in my own way of working with people that supports the spiritual journey, such as body-mind balance, so a few different modalities that I will use to support the balance of body and mind for people, and also in yoga and meditation. So supporting the spiritual journey is my number one focus.
Okay, so the pieces that are in there is that there's a strong urge within yourself to actually support people to gain freedom, and I guess fundamental in that is actually your own attempts to find freedom for yourself. I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about that journey and what that means for you.
Yeah, absolutely. From when I was very small, from my first sort of earliest memories, I was aware that I was connecting to something that was other, and something that was divine, and I could literally look at the sky and see this connection. And so I fundamentally also, from the very earliest time, had a resonance inside to truth. So those two things really supported me despite so many different forms of slavery that I encountered as a woman, on behalf of also of Indigenous groups, in terms of relationships, just as I went through my experiences. And there's a lot of fear that I had to also work my way through from a small child till today. My actual, in my inner being, the constant state that I grew up with was terror. So in working to challenge the fear around being okay, being self-determining, having autonomy, self-responsibility, having a sense of power and divinity, these are all things I've had to work through very, very slowly. So yeah, the one thing that supported me was my inner ability to recognize when something was truthful. So for example, when I was growing up within the confines of the cult, when we were given some sort of, we were being spoken to and being told what to do on all levels, inside I would say to myself, well, that is not true. And so that in essence has really formed the way that I see humans and being on this planet. And that's the need for trusting and developing the intuition. This is the biggest thing that I believe in, is that we actually are divine and human at the same time. And when we're able to actually access that intuition and live within that, we will no longer need a lot of the confines and structures that we now experience in our world.
Well, it's wonderful to hear what you're saying there. The intuition is wonderful. It's another whole, area of perception. So it's another way of actually perceiving the world is through your intuitive faculties. It's been interesting with many of the interviews that I've given, is that, or people have been giving interviews to me, of course, is the correct language. But there's a real strong sense of getting to know, what you're comfortable about. Very, very strong sense in there. And there's a strong sense of recognizing that there's still filters that you actually, like delusional filters, that you actually take that perception in through. So your intuitive stuff, the information's coming into us intuitively, and depending on what your filters are, you're going to create truth around that. I know you know this. I'm not telling you anything new. And but it still is your truth, even if it's completely paranoid and all the rest of it. It's still your own truth. And getting to some place where you actually feel comfortable about your truth is, I know, is your journey, and so I respect it. So what do you see? I know you haven't been able to go out because you've been in quarantine, but what's your perception of what's happening in your nearby community? So like there's all kinds of stuff going on in the streets around you. So just tell us what you think the impact of this reaction to the virus is in terms of what's happening in your near community. Then have a look at your bigger community.
Yeah, absolutely. So duality. So what I'm aware of is there's a lot of suspicion, a lot of fear. There's further sort of separation and segregation. It's been quite a lot of paranoia. I've even had people, trying to speak to me about how I'm isolating, and there's all of that side of things right now in the neighbourhood. I can feel that, and certainly in the wider community. So what I'm aware of as well, not that I've had a lot of support from this, but I am aware that there are beautiful opportunities that people are now taking to really connect to themselves, to connect to their home environment, the environment that they're living on, each other, and then their community, which is another fundamental thing for me, which is so important. It's the deep connection to self, connection to earth, connection to the divine, and from there we go outwards to the community. So I see that people are doing that, and necessity, the mother of invention. They are, looking at ways that they can be self-sustaining. It's beautiful, it's wonderful, and I'm hearing all about that. done a Facebook page for support for the yoga students, and you know, there's lots of this really positive conversation about how we're seeing isolation as a beautiful gift. It's not about somebody saying you must be isolated. That is the fact, we hear that, but also in us saying we decide to take space for ourselves and honor ourselves in that space. And we look, you know, and we choose to use that as a yin time of development, of really checking in and dropping into the self, seeing what actually needs to be done. For all of us, of course, in our lives, there's some sort of back room that's cluttered up with rubbish, or some sort of area that we haven't looked at. For me, it was my kitchen cupboards, and I did them yesterday after a year of thinking about it. So in all ways, these things are symbolic. I just believe that what I'm seeing is more of this. I've certainly felt the fear and suspicion and paranoia. Anyone that's travelled in the last few weeks, you're coming through international borders, will have seen that and experienced that, and it's very heightened right now. And you have this more intense sense of otherness, you know, and you know, of separation and fear. And I guess what it's done is it's highlighted that this is the way that we actually think about each other. It's the way that we perceive threats. You know, the virus is an other, it's a threat, I don't like it, keep it away from me, you know. And so there's that, and then there's the beautiful side of the development of the opportunity of taking that and actually saying, what is the gift here? What are we being gifted with? What are we being supported to look at? I think what I'm seeing in the neighbourhood is a reflection of what I'm seeing globally.
Okay, so the neighbourhood's not any different to the rest of the world. It's just it has a way. It has a way of actually viewing other. It has a way of viewing other people, and it just responds, you know, through, you know, violence of one form or another, whether it's an internal violence or some sort of form of externalized violence. Yeah.
Yes.
Tell me three things that people, like, you're a yoga teacher, and you know, you teach meditation as well. What are things that people can do? Three things that people can do to actually help themselves at this time. So, like, that they can really help themselves. So to, you know, to jump out of perhaps this view of the world, like, you know, the fundamental problem that you're identifying there is that the way we view the world is needing adjustment. Like, there's a need to actually adjust the way we view the world and our environment in general. So what are three things that you can think of that would help people to, you know, to tackle that issue?
So I believe that it's a one issue, that there's not three things, but there's just, for me, there's one thing that kind of stands out. Then of course there's all different layers as that spiral goes outward, but the number one thing is self-love. And one thing is self-love, falling deeply in love with the self, and then understanding from there self-acceptance. So we're not seeing anything as other. The whole world, the whole planet, the experience is a reflection of our own experience. So self-love and acceptance, and from there self-responsibility. So those are the three things. If you're looking at things on a practical level, this is one thing I taught my kids, and it's really quite hilarious. I always used to say, we just have these two rules. And one of them is clean up after yourself at the time, every time. And I really believe in that. So on every level, every interaction, every action, every thought, every behavior, the opportunity is to check into that and see what have you just created in the matrix. So clean up after yourself at the time, every time. Right. And the other rule was respect yourself, respect the earth, respect your elders and each other. So if we come back to those principles, then we have that self-love, acceptance and responsibility, and that comes out into our direct contacts with our family and friends and our environment, our earth that we are on right now, and then onto the wider community. So very important physical practices that you can incorporate into that is looking at the diet. Obviously, looking at your diet is what's happening here. What is the opportunity? You know, have we been over-consuming? Have we been living in these entitled ways? Do we feel so privileged that we're really removed from how food is created? Looking at whether things are local, whether they're organic, looking at your actual environment, what is growing in your garden, you know? So thinking about all these things, the opportunity is actually slow down. Just slow down. Get outside, feet on the earth, breathe, connect to your own divine. So those are the really simple things. Obviously, there's much more in terms of what you can do within a physical practice, within your breath work, and in meditation. There's so much to share about that, but just beginning, if people are feeling like, and I've heard this a little bit too, for myself, I never have this problem, but I've heard a few people say, oh my God, I'm so bored, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, Jesus, I'm busier than I was before. Actually, at the same time, it's an opportunity. Go outside and stand on your earth. How long has it been since you did that? And just breathe. Connect to yourself deeply, connect to your earth, and connect to your divine. And from there, your third eye opens and it becomes clear. What is your next opportunity? What is your next course of action? Slow down, go outside, stand on your earth, breathe. Simple.
Okay. Well, that's really nice. Yeah. Very nice. I'm going to ask you the thorny question. So, you know, you grew up in a religious cult and it was Christian. And so I'm going to ask you the question in that framework. And that is that if there was a mount and you had an opportunity to go and stand on it and give your message out, so send your message out to the world. So you're standing on your mount and you've got your adoring public. What would your message be?
Yeah, it's a great one. Love yourself. Love yourself. Believe in yourself. Trust your intuition. The thing is, I feel like what happens is we get so caught up in the mental body, so caught up in our conditioning, that often we're not being authentic and doing what is in our heart authentically to do. We will talk ourselves out of things and talk ourselves into things. This is what's required. It's what it's expected. Do what's in your heart to do. Be authentic to yourself, and it's the quickest path to your growth. Because as soon as you make a decision, choose an action, a behavior, a thought, an attitude, you send yourself into the matrix down the spiral of growth. And what will happen is the perfect thing for your development. So I feel like it's very simple. Love yourself, trust your intuition, and be authentic. The biggest thing I want to say as well, and it flows perfectly with those things, is trust yourself in your own belief system. You don't need to wait to be told. Wake up in yourself, connect to your divine. We've had such a long history of the patriarchal system, and I've been taught by masters and teachers and gurus, and it's been beautiful. It's served a beautiful purpose. This is our story collectively, and now it's time to wake up and actually grow up. Self-responsibility. Work it out for yourself. Open your third eye. Trust your intuition. Love yourself and love other as yourself.
Okay. All right. I wonder, Kerri, if you could. Thank you for that, and it's a great message. I wonder if you could just talk a little about this vulnerable community that you work with, and what does something like this viral threat mean to that community, and does it even figure?
Yeah. Absolutely. So here in Perth in Australia, I work with the most vulnerable populations, which is Indigenous women and children, as well as, of course, all women and children. In terms of that, we're working with some of the most vulnerable populations on the planet. How we take care of our vulnerable populations is how we are as a community, how we are as a species, how we are as a society, how we take care of our earth. It's all connected. So for me, my concern, if there is one, is that those that are currently vulnerable and have less access to resources than others are even more impacted. If you can imagine that somebody who may have been wanting to leave their situation because of the escalation of violence, maybe looking for pathways to leave the situation, suddenly they're in quarantine or they're being locked down, if we go to level 4, then they are actually in a situation with a perpetrator where they cannot leave. So for women and children that are already vulnerable without access to the resources that most of us enjoy are suddenly more vulnerable as well. So this is a huge issue, and also it really nicely fits into the fact that there's other groups that are marginalised as well. In particular, here in Perth and WA, we have a big homeless community as well. So if we think about that in terms of access to resources, what does isolation mean for someone that's sleeping under a tree?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I guess when I talk about that, there's often this response that comes up, and sometimes it's guilt because, you know, quite often we kind of really don't want to hear about that messy part of the community, the people that are mentally unwell, people that have become violent or become psychotic or are using drugs or, you know, all these sorts of issues. They're not very nice. So a lot of the time there's this guilt response, and I hear it most days of the week. People want to alleviate that anxiety. And so they talk to me, what can I do? What can we give? And it's beautiful as well, because it's also a human response of compassion. We want to alleviate suffering. The biggest thing you actually can do is to give money. And that is simply the way it is here in Perth, in WA, and in Australia, and in many places in the world. What it is here in particular is that we don't have a lot of support for wages. We don't have a lot of support to pay staff. And staff are working tirelessly, and I can really speak to that, to support these vulnerable women and communities, to make sure that they have immediate accommodation and crisis support, and they have a plan going forward and how to keep themselves and their children safe that will start them on their journey towards self-love and self-responsibility, being in the community and having a healthy level of function. The biggest thing that we need is literally the financial resources to pay staff. Currently, refugees are always looking for and even competing for small bits of money that the government or other funding groups are able to provide, with quite a lot of jumping through hoops. So what actually classically happens is that people would like to come and volunteer. Volunteering is beautiful as well, but also, of course, there's a process, and it's a human sort of cost of bringing somebody in. And now we have social distancing. It's very hard to, it's going to be more increasingly difficult to manage that. And then we have to train people and teach them. And then people often want to deliver or for us to collect their used items so that people going forward can build a home again, which is also beautiful. Most of us don't have storage facilities. Most refugees don't have that ability to pick up the things from your house. What you can do is convert that into some money and donate that. If you are in WA, you can look up the Women's Council and find local refugees to donate to. This is the most effective way of actually supporting. We can't always manage your bits of time that are offered, or you know, white goods and beds and bits and pieces to start up a house again, although there are some refugees that can do that. The biggest way you can support is actually through generating, one, promoting and sharing with others in the community that this is a real need and that all of us can assist and support in some way. And the second thing is actually the generation of finance.
Okay. Well, so that knowledge, being able to actually have that knowledge and recognize, and I love the way that you're talking about it. You know, you're actually explaining that once a person becomes a bit recognizing of that question, so like the question comes up, what about the guy that's sleeping under the tree or in the, you know, behind a building or something, or these women who have been beaten up by their husbands or boyfriends or whatever. And as you say, like the first thing that occurs is a guilt response. You know, there is this sense of guilt actually within there, and there's not too much love of self sitting in and around all those guilty feelings, that you're talking about. And that, as you say, like that human reaction of wanting to come and do something physically yourself, so provide some goods or some voluntary services or whatever. And what you're pointing out for people who are listening is that that's just not practical. It's it takes too much resources to actually bring somebody up to speed, and delivering and managing those resources is just too troublesome. So it's wonderful advice, what you're actually providing there, and it's trying to redirect that guilt. So like, we make an observation, you're talking a lot there about your intuition. So a lot of your talk has been about, honouring your intuition. As I say, like, my point is that the first thing that happens with that intuitive sense that comes in is that I put it through the filter of guilt. So my delusion is that I'm guilty, and I feel guilty. So it goes straight through that delusionary filter. So how useful that insight is, or that intuition is, you and I may differ on this. But nonetheless, there is a point where you have to work through that and actually get to a place where you actually say, well, the most practical thing I can do here now is firstly distance the guilt from the equation. And then after doing that is to reach out in the way that actually is the most practical thing, which is to give some money. So we're going to have on, as a link to this video, we're going to have a donate button or something of that nature, so that we can have people do donations directly to the work that you're doing. And the message that I share with you is that overcome your guilt and actually turn those guilty feelings around in a compassionate way to some practical stuff. So this conference is all about practical things that people can do, and the most practical guidance that you have for this most vulnerable group in Australia, and probably they're as vulnerable as anybody in the world. You have access to all of those statistics, and I know the situation for Indigenous women is absolutely disastrous here in Australia. So I urge people to follow these links and have a look at doing the practical thing.
Thanks so much.
So what is your final message to viewers? What's your final message? Final summary points.
Yes, of which I have here, there's 10. I can be a little wordy, okay? So even though I know that I've said a lot of the same thing around self-love and acceptance and intuition, my final things that I would want to share with everyone, first thing is self-love, acceptance, and self-responsibility. For me, it all comes from there. The second thing is ground, center, and shield. So those very sort of common but very basic practices of grounding into the earth, of centering your energy, and doing a protection of however you like to see or experience it. Connecting, or for some people it's about reconnecting. For some people may feel that they've never truly connected in the first place. So the big message is connect, first to self, then the earth, to the divine, and then to other. The next point is be authentic, that absolute true expression of who you are. Don't be tempted to have to, alter that for anyone. Be authentic. Take opportunities. The next one is about laughter. So live and laugh and love, Laughter is, at this point in time, we just need to remember that it is such a medicine, and it really changes the vibration, the frequency that we're operating on. We let the whole energetic matrix around us, we give a very clear message that we are not stressed, that we are open, that we are in love, and that we are living in that energy of laughter and lightness. It's really, really important. If you feel like that's a lot and it's quite difficult at this time with all the seriousness around us, watch some comedies, have some time with family, and slow down and remember what makes you laugh, what really turns you on as a human being. Breathe, can't overestimate that or overstate that enough. breathing. There's a whole lot of beautiful pranayama or practices for the breath. Very important. Take a full breath before you do anything or say anything. Slow down. Drink clean water. Very important. Everywhere around the world, I guess the water quality is different, but here in WA, the water still has fluoride and chlorine and a whole lot of things in it. And in the past, it's been used for genocide, and that's my little comment about that, is that I would always encourage people to drink, to go fluoride-free. Fluoride has an effect on the pineal gland. When you're talking about intuition and opening your third eye, you need clean water in your body. There's a whole science around water. I'm not going to talk about that. The next thing is take the opportunity to take stock, take inventory. What is the messy back room in your life that's not sorted out? What's the messy area of our garden that's not sorted out? You now have time to go and manage that. Looking into your own backyard before you come out into the community. Then those questions like, what can I do? So what can I do for my self-growth today? How do I serve myself and my growth? What can I do for my family or whānau, my immediate connections? How best can I serve them? It's the second part. And then the third part, what can I do for Gaia, for the community and for the most vulnerable? Because they're all essentially one thing. Starting with self, then to our next immediate contacts and connections, and then moving outwards to the world.
Cool. Well, that's great. Thank you so much, Kerri. It's been a joy to actually hear what you've got to say. And, I hope people follow up with the links that you're, putting up against the this video. And, go well. All strength to your arm with your journey and, the journey of support for these vulnerable people in the community. So lots of messages to take away from this interview. So thanks very much. Thank you.